Hi, I am Paige Wilhide. I am the writer, star of, and producer of Breakup Addict. And it is a solo show where I play over 20 different characters, including the voices in my head and some of my ex-boyfriends. If you want to learn more, watch the show. I I've always loved theater. I feel like I was born to be on stage. I remember actually I don't remember, but my mom always tells me that when I would wake up in the morning in my crib, rather than crying, I would be singing. So that just says a little bit about like my kind of destiny, and throughout my life I've always felt so alive and at home and just like so myself whenever I'm on stage. I think first and foremost, I'm a performer. That's really how I like to express myself. And um, throughout my theater career, I've always performed other artists' work. I've memorized the lines and, gotten in touch with the character and gotten to know the character and their motivation and brought other people's words to life on stage and on film. And it was more recently that I really embraced this idea that I am a playwright. I can write down my own stories, and I can turn them into a script and turn them into dynamic characters and perform, bring my own words to life. And so I've always been a writer in different ways, I've always been interested in creative writing, but first and foremost, I'm a performer. And then secondly, I am a writer and really starting to just fully own that part of my artist self. I love being a playwright. I love it because, I get to express myself in a different way. It's not, it's different when you're memorizing the words of somebody else. When it's like your words and your stories. Like my show is very autobiographical, so it's very much me. And so like when I'm taking on those characters, I actually like get to play actor and playwright at the same time, and I get to kind of alter the lines depending on, I think it's because I really like to be in control now that I'm thinking about it. It's a control thing at the end of the day. But yeah, I get to like change the script if I want to, if I'm feeling into a character. And for example, grief is a character in my show, and if I'm feeling grief and I'm like, okay, this is how grief would be standing and talking, and then I'm like, but that's not exactly like the language he would be saying. I get to alter it, and there's just a lot of creative freedom that I have when I'm also writing the show. I see the theater experience as a co-created experience. It's like a feedback loop, right? So I am up there, yes, like I am on the stage, I am giving the performance that people have paid to see, and their feedback is what then like gives me more, like kind of moves me through the art, through the day, through the show. um and then yeah, I just feel like there's something that becomes so alive in that theater, in those moments, that's like so unique and can't be recreated. um and even if I perform the show, the same exact lines, the same exact characters another day, it's going to be a different audience. So it's actually going to be a whole different experience for both the audience and myself. Sometimes when I perform, I learn more about my characters. Sometimes I learn more about my story. Sometimes I get to like learn about my own sense of humor and adaptation and intuition. Like, so there's just so many layers of exploration that I get to drop into when I'm on stage with the feedback of an audience. And it's this beautiful, yeah, it's a co-creation. I think when there's like a really true piece of art that comes through you, it can't be ignored. And that's kind of how I ended up writing Breakup Addict. So I I went through two quite tumultuous heartbreaks back to back with very unavailable people. Like they were very different, but also had so many similarities to these two situations. And as I was realizing that there was like that I was the common denominator in both of those situations, I was like, okay, I need to change something. It's not them. It's like, what can I change in order to be better and have better relationships? So I started going to meetings as part of a 12-step program for sex and love addiction. And I worked with a sponsor, and my sponsor told me that for the first 30 days, I was not to interact with any love interests at all, which generally for me are men. And so I was in withdrawal from my favorite drug, men. And I did that for 30 days and then 60 days. And it really took me into an identity crisis. Like I realized that it's like I had piled my identity on top of this idea that I am valuable, I am loved if a man loves me, if somebody else approves of me and likes me. And when that like piece, when that like core belief crumbled, everything else did too. So I spent a lot of time in isolation. I was in a depression. I was eating a lot. I was like just trying to find other vices to kind of like fill the void that I didn't have because I had all this, I was not talking to men. And during that time, I started writing. Like that was a way that I really tried to cope with some of these feelings. And I wrote down my stories. I wrote down what I was going through. And then I met my coach, Jessica Lynn Johnson, and she helped me piece all the puzzle pieces together into a solo show. And I really channeled all of that like excess power and energy that I would have just put out into the world, into like trying to be in a relationship or get love or sex. Like all that energy I could now channel into my art and into Breakup Addict. So Breakup Addict opens with me, my character of Paige, sitting in a 12-step meeting in her very first one, and is having is kind of seeing herself for the first time in a really eye-opening and painful way, and seeing like, oh, you all are sex and love addicts, and I think I might be too, but I don't want to be. And so there's like that admission that starts the show, and then it travels through different stories, how she got there, and then eventually like looking at some of her patterns in relationships. And the thread of the story is it tracks through the 12 characteristics of sex and love addiction. And even if you don't consider yourself a sex and love addict, even if you don't consider yourself an addict in general, the characteristics of sex and love addiction, I think, are something that everybody can relate to in some way or another. So those are really ways that I like to use. They're like pillars that I like to use throughout the show, anchors to support people in seeing themselves and their own patterns and their own relationships in my story. So it tracks through that, and then eventually I come to a realization that I need to be on my own for a little while. And I make like a really hard choice to set boundaries with some of these men and to really take care of myself and go on a self-love journey. And it kind of comes around the other side for me like loving myself again. I really want this story to be told. And I think it's a story that gives people a lot of freedom and approval for their own relationships, for spots that they may be in their breakups, in their dating situations, that like we think we're the only ones. We think like, oh, nobody else has to deal with, feeling lonely and wanting to numb out because I feel lonely, or nobody else has to deal with having struggles setting boundaries with other people. Nobody else has to deal with being afraid of being abandoned all the time and how that shows up in relationships. And these things do show up for people, and so and there's absolutely no question that this story has to be told. And it's really my hope that every audience member walks away feeling changed in some way. And when I say changed, it's like, oh my God, Paige saw a part of me that I have not wanted to talk about or share, or that I didn't really want the world to see. And she gave me so much love and approval for that thing that I can now work with it. I can now like take that, that deep fear that I had that I would be alone forever. This is just an example, but like, that deep fear that I had that I would be single and alone forever. And I can now share that with somebody, or I can go get therapy, or like I can work with a coach and get some support. Or I can like read a book or listen to a podcast, right? So I want people to walk away feeling like a part of them got really touched and fully seen and loved in my show. And yeah, it's that would be like the greatest gift ever. What I've uncovered on my healing journey is we heal when the parts of ourselves that feel the most unlovable are seen and fully loved. So the parts of ourselves where we feel shame, or we feel guilt for walking away from that relationship, or we feel so alone because everybody around us is engaged and getting married and having babies and we're still single. So these are just some examples, but it's like the little tiny parts of us where we feel like that we can't love fully, right? Healing happens when someone else gives us permission to love that part. And that's ultimately what I want to create with this show, is giving people permission to love parts of themselves that they previously would be hiding or ignoring or trying to run away from. And I think that is how you take pain and turn it into power, rather than taking pain and suffering, choosing the suffering route. This is like taking pain and turning it into power. I did that through my show, through writing down my stories. I was in such a dark time, and I really alchemized that into this beautiful, like, moving piece of art. And I think the art is just going to continue living on. It's going to have its own it's going to become its own body of work. I don't know exactly how, because it's not up to me anymore. It's really up to like the people who see the show and the people who are moved by it and what they get from it, and being able to like carry on the message. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's like, really, can I love the parts of me that I think are the most unlovable? My desire for when I am on stage is to be so fully present in my body that I'm not thinking, that I am just like letting the lines and the characters, oh my gosh, I'm getting chills and like tears are coming to my eyes as I'm thinking about this, but like just letting it move through me in the most present way. Like there's I talk about higher power and God and the universe, in my show, and being connected to spirit. And I think one of the reasons that I love performing so much is because that's when I feel most connected to spirit, is in that moment. And so, yeah, my hope is that I really get to fully be out of my head and fully just like channel the art through me. If you've ever experienced heartbreak, if you've ever been in a relationship where you are wondering where you went, if you've ever left a relationship wondering who you are, anybody who's dating, like this is really for people who feel like they are wanting to be seen in their relationships and in their dating life. you must go see Breakup Addict if you have ever been through heartbreak, if you've ever walked away from a relationship and wondered, what happened? Where did I go? Who am I now? How am I going to rebuild from this place? If you've ever been dating and you wake up and you're like, what am I doing? You know, how do I do this? If you've been resistant to dating, if you've ever been scared to put yourself out there and be vulnerable with somebody, this show is for anybody who is in relationships, wants to be in relationships, has just come out of a relationship. It is a really powerful way to be entertained, right? You're going to laugh, you're going to feel things, you're going to cry. It's a really entertaining play that also will leave you with something. It's like you're not just going to a play for 75 minutes and then you leave and go to dinner and like forget the next day. This play like lives on through you, and it will continue to bring its lessons and bestow its gifts upon you as you're digesting it, you know, after the show. And I really encourage you to bring a friend to it so you can talk about it after, because there's so much to get, and you definitely won't regret coming to see Breakup Addict. I'm Paige Wilhide, and I am going to be performing my solo show, Breakup Addict, and I can't wait to see you there. You can also visit breakupaddict.com for more information about the show, upcoming performances and workshops, and you can follow me on Instagram at Paige Wilhide. It's the best way to talk to me if you want to get in touch.